Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel on how Latin America is embracing open banking. I am honored to have panelists that have incredible expertise on the subject of open banking, and will certainly be able to add incredible amount of depth around this very captivating subject, especially around, again, the Latin American market. As a panelist, I have Mariana Velázquez, Bruno Diniz, and Jonathan Garzón. And I'm the chair, Carlos Figueredo. Now I'll let each one of the panelists introduce themselves. Mariana?
Yes, thank you, Carlos. Well, I am a former collaborator in the CNBV, the banking regulator, and I participated in the development of the fintech sector from the regulatory perspective. I also collaborated in the regulatory sandbox for several months, and last January I joined Open Vector, where the team there, we all are very supportive of open banking worldwide.
Thank you, Mariana. Bruno?
Hi, Carlos. First of all, thanks for the invitation. And my name is Bruno Diniz. I'm founder of Spiralen, which is a consultancy firm focused on basically helping corporates and also governmental bodies on how to navigate the fintech ecosystem here in the region. I'm also a teacher at the Fundação Getúlio Vargas, which is a university here in Brazil, specifically in their fintech course, and also at the University of São Paulo in their fintech course. And recently I have joined AppData, which is the Financial Data and Technology Association for South America. Prior to that, I used to work at the Brazilian Startup Association at their fintech vertical specifically, and in which I have been focusing a lot on the development of the open banking, and also about the regulatory sandbox and things in other regulatory aspects. So thanks again for having me here.
Thank you very much, Bruno. An honor to have you. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Garzón. I'm Head of Innovation and Digital Business in Secoban. Secoban is the clearinghouse in Mexico for direct debit, checks, and electronic transfer. And in open banking, we are working side by side with the authorities and and we are coordinating monthly roundtables with banks, with fintechs, and with other relevant players to discuss the impact and share experience about exposing APIs, about what are the use cases that are going to be critical for our environment in Mexico. And I want to really thank Mary Walker and Carlos Figueredo for the invitation to be here in this panel with high experts like Mariana and Bruno.
No, and again, I think I speak on behalf of everyone. Thank you to Marie Walker and her team for allowing us this ability to have this panel. So before we begin, una muy buenas tardes a todos nuestros oyentes, todas las personas que están participando de este panel de habla hispana. Este panel se va a tratar, como dice ahí, el tema es de cómo Latinoamérica está embarcando sobre la oportunidad de Open Banking. Y bueno, como han visto, tenemos un panel verdaderamente espectacular de expertos. Es un verdadero honor de estar con todos ustedes. Lastly, my name is Carlos Figueredo. I'm the chair of the panel. I'm the CEO of Open Vector, and was previously the head of data standards for the open banking implementation entity. So very heavily involved in the open banking initiative, as Mariana mentioned, as part of the Open Vector team. And again, just very, very happy to be here with all of you, sharing this very hot topic at the moment. So let's get started. So the first question I'm going to go ahead and direct to Mariana. So Mariana, as someone that worked for the regulator and implemented the first open banking structures in America, what are the lessons learned from the UK that LATAM can benefit from?
Yes, Carlos. Let me put some slides on the screen. Well, as you know, researchers and regulators have turned their heads to see what has been done in the UK and how what they initiated 4 years ago has evolved until today, when they show very interesting numbers. So at the CNBV, we took a deep dive into the Open Banking Standard Report published by the Open Data Institute, because we wanted to learn what was that, what were the implications, the risks, the benefits, and overall the key considerations. And we did a couple of visits to the UK where we interviewed with authorities and some institutions. And as a result, open banking was implemented in Mexico with the publication of the FinTech law in 2018, mandating not only banks, but all financial services providers to share data with third parties. However, there are significant differences in the approach for implementation, as we can see in this slide. I believe the most significant difference is that in the UK it was established a central entity, the Open Banking Implementation Entity, that performs most functions related to open banking, whereas in Mexico it's the financial authorities themselves who will issue their own rules and standards that will apply for their supervised sectors. So I believe that will entail certain challenges as to what data standards will be developed, which entities they will apply for, the implementation phases. But most importantly, I think that we will see in time what will be the effect in interoperability and consistency across the industry of having 4 different authorities issuing their standards. So having said that, and looking into the UK's results, I think it would make sense to consider establishing a dedicated task force to develop open banking and perform some of the underlying processes such as APIs development and maintenance, TPP's enrollment, the management of the directory, and leave the authorization and supervision functions obviously to authorities. So I think that would be a first lesson. The second lesson, I think it has to do with consumer adoption. In the UK, in the early days of open banking, many consumers received communications from their banks about sharing data with third parties, which made them feel quite insecure about that idea. And that is perfectly understandable because at first banks were very concerned about facing security or data privacy issues. And due to this increasing connectivity with new players. And also, on the other hand, consumers are traditionally very cautious about their privacy. But now that it's proven that this can be done in a safe environment, I think that consumers need to get the right message. They need to know first that they own their data and that they can decide who they want to share it with. They are entitled to know what are the benefits of sharing that data, and especially that this can be done in a secure way. Because the process of data exchange is embedded within a framework with security, data privacy, and consumer protection safeguards. So I think that obviously, as it is common, early adopters will start and they will push for the increase in the usage of open banking based solutions. But it is important for consumers to know that this is a safe framework. And the last lesson that I wanted to share with the audience in the Mexican experience is that I think it was a good decision to include all financial services providers in the FinTech law's mandate because it automatically enabled open finance. So in Mexico, we are now talking in terms of open finance. And the benefit of that is that no further legal modifications will be needed to enable open finance. And we know that open finance is the next step of open banking. So I think that is another lesson, another important consideration to take when studying international experience.
Thank you very much, Mariana. I think that this is very, very, very good information, and I couldn't be more in agreement with you. And I know that both yourself and Jonathan, I know myself that we've been very involved in this, and I think you're absolutely right. Mexico definitely has taken a very ambitious approach with such an aggressive fintech law of 2,200 institutions involved. And when in the UK we only had 9 as part of the first CMA 9, right, for the initial thought. So very aggressive. Bruno, do you have any comment on Mariana's slides or anything else you'd like to add?
I think that we're going to discuss like Brazilian experience later on, but I believe that many other things that applies to Mexico, some of them, that were guided by the UK experiences, something that Brazil is also using. So I think that all the UK experience set the basis for the other countries, like as a benchmark to work on how they craft their own policies. So I believe that Brazil is following a similar path, but with some, specific things, I think, which is natural. I think that the fact that the Brazil observed both the UK experience and also the ongoing Australian experience and the European Union experience with PSD2, I think it's very, very critical to avoid some mistakes that perhaps that happen along the way. So I think it's very important in this sense as well. And we are developing our specific way to do that. I don't know if should I show the presentation that I have here just to make a contrast, or we're gonna do that later on?
Yeah, let's go ahead and wait until we jump on your question, because
Sure.
I think you've got some very good information on that. But something you're saying is very important. I think that everybody looked at the UK, as the starting point, and now they are growing on that experience. I think that's really positive to watch that this is an incremental. We shouldn't look at the UK as, well, is that all you did? No, well, actually it is, because there was no other benchmark. So I think it's a very good starting point, but we should definitely learn and grow. I don't know, Jonathan, if you've got an additional comment on that.
Yes, I think we can learn three special things for me. First one, to have an independent entity that coordinates all the open banking efforts, because they have to take in account all the stakeholders, not only the obligated entities. You have to take in account the vision and what they can provide of third-party providers and the consumer. An additional of that, this entity must have a one and only centralized directory of which of the third-party providers are authorized. In Mexico, as was saying by Mariana, we have many entities or many authorities that coordinate different efforts. You have Banco de Mexico and you have CNBV, and that's a little bit difficult for all the environment to understand different rules and different chances. Another thing is the standardization. One very specific point that you have to take in account is interoperability. Without the standard to fintechs to connect or third-party providers to connect each bank is going to be a nightmare. So standardization took the effort or took the vision that has a UK or PSD2 and transforming to the flexible way that Mexico needs is another thing that we really need. And finally, the vision of protecting the consumer, using mechanisms like open authentication that prevents the consumer to exchange password or exchange users can help the adoption of the consumer. And having another thing, I think, is the resolution mechanism for the consumers. If one consumer feel attacked or feel that his privacy has not been taken in account, he can go to this mechanism and other party can help them to solve this problem. No, I think that three things is we can focus to learn about UK in open banking projects.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. And I think we're going to run into a problem here, because if we have a lot to say about the subject, and if that's only question one, we're not going to make it to question 6. I can tell you that much. So 2 things there very important that you mentioned: collaboration, standardization, which of course I'm very fond of. But the other thing is consumer centric. We have to remember that the reason why we are all here is the consumer. This is not about the banks, and it's not about the fintechs. This is all about the consumers. So Bruno, now I'm going to go to you then with that, with your question about in Latin America really looks at Brazil to learn from the good experiences, but also bad experiences. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of how things have happened through history. So, and it looks at how, the good and the bad of the things that you've gone through. What is Brazil doing as it relates to open banking that may be different from other countries, or is Brazil following the same structure as other countries? And it leads right to what you were talking about.
Perfect. Yeah, I have a couple slides here to try to explicit that, because on May the 4th, the Brazilian Central Bank just released the open banking law. So it was under a public consultation on January, up until January, from November to January. And then on May the 4th, they released the law. So it's very, very fresh here. I'm going to show it to you guys. So basically, the fundamental principles for Brazil to implement the open banking here, basically four principles, key drivers. First one is to encourage innovation in the system. As we are going through a process of many different initiatives by the regulators to try to foster innovation in the whole ecosystem. Second is to promote competition because we have I think many different countries in Latin America. We have a very concentrated financial system on the hands of the big players. That's something that also happened in other countries in Europe as well. But I think in Brazil it's critical. It's pretty critical, and I think it's helping open up this space for more competitors. Third is increase the efficiency of the financial system, as we all agree with that. And fourth, but not least here, promote financial inclusion, which is a very, very important aspect in the region. So the central bank basically, in the law, they put all those different drivers here for them to do this open banking process here and regulation. Talking about specific aspects, as we're talking about the differentiate from the UK and other parts. In Brazil, we have this part of the law that was released on May the 4th, which basically is the regulation. That's the basic regulation by the central bank, which states about open banking objectives and principles, minimum scope of data and services, scope of participants, sharing requirements, responsibilities on sharing, hiring non-regulated third parties, how this happens, gratuities in reimbursements among participants, how that happens in terms of how many APIs requests can be done, and what up until what level it's going to be charged and things like that. Minimum guidelines on the so-called convention, because here in Brazil, a part of the law is going to be made by a self-regulation in the country. So they call that convention, which is basically a reunion of different market participants to discuss some specific aspects of open banking here. And last, the implementation schedule that they also released. So taking the turn and looking at the self-regulatory part of that, because we're going to have like an implementation entity that's going to be created after that, and inside of it we're going to have different and several working groups composed by different market participants. So this group is going to be responsible for structuring responsibly for the governance, technical logical standards. So they're going to help crafting all the standardization of the APIs and the tech related questions, dispute resolutions and refund mechanisms among participants. So all of that's going to be defined into these groups created, at which the central bank is going to mediate that. They're going to be on top of that, but the participants have to agree on that. And I have here a timeline of how it's going to be done. And so we started back in November, which basically here the central bank created the first reading version of the open banking regulation and put it under a consultation. The deadline was on January 20 of 2020. Then the central bank on March created a specific group for governance. So they created, prior to releasing the law, they created a group with market participants, trade associations to discuss governance. And then on May the 4th, they published the law, the regulation, and also some parts that was going to be subject to self-regulatory mechanisms. And after that, we're going to really start paving the very different steps into implementation. So in November, the first deadline on sharing information on products and services by participation institutions. So what the different products and how much each bank charge for each product, all of that's going to be open up until November this year. Then we're going to have on May 2021 the sharing of basic customer data and transactional data. And the interesting thing is it's going to be on May, and also our GDPR, which is called here in Brazil LGPD, which is the stepping stone for the rights of data sharing and all of that, is going to be enforced on May as well. So I think the timeline is just is just right for that. Third, we're going to have the deadline on August 2021 for the payments initiation, which is also going to be connected with a system here in Brazil called PIX, which is it's just like the CODI they're going to have in Mexico, is our instant payments infrastructure here. So the payment initiation is going to be connected to our instant payments system here. And the fourth, the last one, is going to be the implementation of the open finance scope. So it's going to be a broader scope on data sharing, on pensions, foreign exchange, insurance, and investment products, and so on. So it's a very, very ambitious project, but I believe that just as we have many of these moving parts already established in countries like the UK and all of that, is going to shortcut our process in this whole thing. So that's the kind of the mix that the Brazil find on all that. That's a little bit of what happened in the UK, some proprietary way of doing that, and also learning from experience from places like Australia and the ongoing process they're going through there.
Thank you very much. So again, a very good insight on what's happening in Brazil. Again, it's great to see that, again, another step taken forward with something like LGPD, that's, taking the steps of the learning from GDPR as an advance. So again, very good step. Mariana, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, yes. It looks like they have already a structure in mind, and good luck with that. Looks great. In the end, I think each country has its own market conditions, its dynamics, its legal systems, its resources, and all that. So yes, it is important to take into account international experience. What are the goods and the bads that have been identified, and of course try to incorporate within our own frameworks what is working around. So there is no one-size-fits-all model, and however, I think that we have observed in all cases a constant, which is, and you mentioned it before, collaboration. I mean, this is such a huge initiative. There are so many aspects to be covered and safeguarded. There are so many stakeholders involved in it that it is paramount collaboration of experts with knowledge in one area and other experts with knowledge in another area and with different expertises. And that collaboration will be crucial for the successful of the implementation of open banking or open finance.
And just the one thing I'm going to say on that, and then I'll hand over to Jonathan for his comments, is the one thing I would like to see that we don't make the mistake is that we should try that for every country that embraces open banking or open finance, that they use the same pillars of structures, so that someday when we talk about real open data, talking from Chile all the way to Canada and even across to other regions, that if we are smart enough to implement and learn from PSD2 the mistakes of other initiatives, that if we can implement the key pillars, we will be able to speak the same language in the future, in very near future. So again, it's good to hear that Brazil is following slightly different, but very much the same, the same concept, the same structures, the same key pillars of collaboration, regulation, data standards, GDPR in whatever form that you're going to do it, but it's the same structure. So, Jonathan?
I think it's too early to learn about Mexican experience in open banking because, as Mariana told, we have published the FinTech law 2 years ago, and nowadays we're expecting that in this month, on the next one, is going to be published only the ATM's API standard. So I think we're slow in that thing. But what we can learn from Mexico is to, as in Brazil, start with an open finance scope, start small, scale quickly, do it in that way, so every player in the environment can receive the benefits of that. Two things that I don't like about the Mexican scope is, one, we take out the initiation of payments, and that's sad because many authorities and experts have told that financial inclusion starts with payments, with the movement of money. and the payment serves as a gateway to other financial services, such as services, credit, and insurance. So taking that into account, I think it's a lost opportunity, and we have to change it quickly. We have CODI. That CODI is like our digital payment method. It's a railway inside the real-time payments service that our central bank introduced like 2 years ago, where merchants and other third-party providers can ask for a payment in a presence and not presence payment or not presence relation. But that was a thing that we lost, I think, the initiation of payment. And the second thing we have to learn or to improve is to scale it more quickly. As I have told, we only have now the ATM standard. We really need the standard for transactional data, because if the new formula of the success in this time is to predict necessities, predict or infer wider behavioral of the consumer, increase meaningful and real-time context advice, no, with our phone or our computer, we need the consumer transactional data. We need that. This is the fuel to improve open banking. I also have to say that open banking does not work alone. We do not only need data from the consumer. We need to introduce technology as automatization and machine learning to take data, transform it to information, and then value to the consumer. We have to change that and understand that we do not only need data. We have to go more from exchanging data to create value to the consumer.
No, and thank you very much for that, Jonathan. I think there's definitely a lot of things you said there that are really important. I think the fact that that Mexico started with ATMs, I think in some ways I'll slightly still, defend the reason why, but I can definitely see what you're saying. Now, if you look it back in hindsight, the purpose of having transactional data is certainly important, and payments definitely is the motor of what we're talking about. But again, it's a great topic for another conversation. But I am going to go to you, Jonathan, now with the question is, what is your general perception of open banking for LATAM as it relates to the overall social opportunity? Are we focusing on the consumer as we should?
Over the past years, the financial sector has increased dramatically in advanced and developed countries, like USA, Europe, East Asia, resulting in a rise of unemployment, eradication of poverty, and the economic development at individual and enterprise level. But LATAM is another story. The lack of incentives to make people to entrust their funds in the formal financial institution, the insufficient bank competition, and the bureaucratic onboardings and the friction of the using of digital financial channels makes financial inclusion, that was telling us Bruno about it, a really outstanding debt to be covered in LATAM, and at the same time a great opportunity. That's why Latin American market is different. It's a big debt, but in the same time the big opportunity. According to this slide and the World Bank report of 2017, in 2014, on a global level, 2 billion of adults were unbanked, and in 2017, 1.7 billion remain unbanked. So we can understand that we are going forward. We are trying to make them included, but there's still not enough. And many of these unbanked people is in, as you say, in Latin America and the Caribbean part of these countries. So there's a big market to attend them. Financial inclusion is that demonstrates here, or we can see in Mexico, is that we have more than 85% of the payments are in cash. Less than 40% of the adults have a saving account. More than 25% of small towns do not have at least one point of financial access. It's meaning that there is no branch and there is no ATM. So how can they use the financial services? Another thing is that is common, I think, in many countries in LATAM, is that we have more than 80% of adults in penetration of smartphones. So we have a big opportunity using the information we can build more consumer-focused products and services, and we can give them ubiquitously accessible by our mobile phone and with internet, and enhance user experience and awareness, achieving efficiency gains and lower market barriers. So that's the main point of view of LATAM. It's a big opportunity because many people is not using financial services. That's why fintech law in Mexico and in many countries of Latin America focus of inclusion and innovation, help the consumer to use the financial services, but we have to know the consumer to make more personalized and contextual services in the moment and to the person that they need in the specific financial moment in their lives.
That's great, Jonathan, and I really appreciate this data because it's very, very valuable. So again, very, very good point. I'm going to be moving on. I'm going to have to skip the questions from the panelists just because of time. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to be asked the different questions. So going back to you, Mariana, now, through your hands-on experience in Mexico, how did you conclude that the UK open banking structure was the structure to follow for Mexico, and what can other countries learn from this experience?
Yes. Well, when we were developing the fintech law, we did a detailed analysis of international experience. Back then, there were not many models to study. We basically studied, other than the UK, we studied the cases in the PSD2, the EU, and Asia countries. And then we learned that there were important differences in the approaches for implementation. So we learned there was a mandatory approach versus a facilitative approach or a market-driven approach. We also saw that there were other aspects that were different. For example, the scope of entities that would be sharing data, the types of data that would be shared, the permissions to access data, which could be a read access or a read-write access, etc. We also saw that countries such as Hong Kong and Australia were already taking note of the UK experience, and actually they included some elements of that experience in their own frameworks. And in Mexico, we were following up on the UK's evolution, open banking evolution. And we learned from them, and as Jonathan mentioned before, that standardization is good for market efficiency. And there is no need for all developers to build APIs to connect to Bank A and Bank B and Bank C. So it was an element that was adopted in Mexico, standardization. It was also considered to take a mandatory approach in the country because a legal mandate would accelerate implementation of open banking in Mexico. So as you know, because you were part of it, the UK had to build something from scratch, which was actually, I think, a very stressful process. But this is no longer the case for the countries that are planning to adopt open banking. As we mentioned before, they can see what elements in other countries are being developed and try to introduce them into their own frameworks. Like, for example, in Mexico, it was decided to use the UK standard technical specifications, and just to make sure that they would work for Mexico, a pilot was run in the form of a hackathon, and the results were that the UK standards would be good for Mexico. They would only need to be adapted to the Mexican context. So that was the path that was decided to be followed, and I think that the future developments of standards, the same criteria should be used, because in the end, those specifications are based on ISO international standards. So I don't know, following this path, maybe one day in the future, it can be achieved a regional or even a global open banking ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Mariana. And I think, yes, it was an incredibly difficult challenge. And I think for all of us on this panel, I'm hoping that in the next 5 years, all of us having had a major hand on this, we can look back and look at this and be very proud of this. So moving on to Bruno now. Bruno, with Brazil and some of the neighboring countries struggling with corruption and financial volatility, how do you think open banking may be able to assist in these matters?
Well, Carlos, I think it's a very broad problem when you talk about corruption, and it's a very structural problem we have in the region as well. I think not only Brazil, but in the region as a whole. But I think that some aspects brought by the open banking and open finance context, I think that can help a lot in terms of transparency. I think it's very important. I think the whole market's going through a more transparent way of doing business here. But I think open banking is going to accelerate that even further. So it's going to be very important for the region. And also, I think that the component of financial inclusion, which is something that also, in certain aspects, bring people to a better understanding of what's going on in terms of finance. I think that's also helped somehow in this view of combating corruption and things like that. But I think it's not extremely correlated, but I think it brings certain aspects that is very, very important. And regarding to market volatility, all this modernization of the financial system here in Brazil can take advantage of that, and in the long run helps in the problem of volatility. So I think it's all sometimes it's like a small piece, but it can provide a large impact in the long run here in the country.
No, thank you very much, Bruno, on that. And I think just one comment I have is I think the elimination, the ability for consumers to have all these new products and services, and with open banking and financial inclusion, the one thing that I think will help in the fight of corruption will be the elimination of cash, or at least the reduction of cash on the streets. I think that's a really big point, especially in countries that are very, very much needing of cash as a very way of handling corruption, in various volatile countries. So, and Jonathan, just to, with your, the last question going to you there is that what benefits and risks do you see in the Mexican fintech law, since it involves over 20 subsectors, many more than any other country that is implementing open banking so far?
Hi, thank you. I think the scope was included because, as I told you in the past intervention, more than 50% of the adults do not have access to banking services, in addition to the vast geographic distribution in Mexico. That provokes the inability to set up the infrastructure required for physical banking services. We need a lot of participants in the open banking and digital payments to reach the financial inclusion we want, and to eliminate the cash management that you were telling us, Carlos. The key problem is that why we choose this aggressive scope is because nowadays it's incredibly difficult to think financial services outside of the branch. When we want to open an account, we need to bring many documents. We need a process of onboarding and ID that is very difficult to people nowadays. So we need to planner to work together to take friction out of banking experience, make it more faster, easier, and even sexier. We need that more participants. We need more information, more opportunities to reach an embedded real banking, which will not be limited for few channels or products. It will be more focused on advice. We need to create value to the consumer to include them in the financial services. If you're asking them to change the things they do today. If you want them to change and now use less cash and do digital wallets, and you want today to save in an account, in a financial account, a formal account, you need to give them value, not to give them free, to give them more value in the services they want. So that brings me that's why I think we need a bigger scope to bring or to work faster to that inclusion. But we have to look something. There is a bigger risk. It's a risk to put them all together to interoperate in the same time. We have to work to grow and scale slowly, because if you want to exchange a lot of information And we were working, all the financial ecosystem was working, telling the consumer not to exchange information, to be very secure about their password or about their information. And now we are telling them, share your information, consent to share the information. We're shifting the mindset we need to do. So we have new entrants, many third parties provided that will want this information. We have a lot of regulation, so we need to walk, not to run. We need to walk.
That's perfect, Jonathan, and I think that really does round up a lot of everything that we're saying here. So just to wrap up, I'm going to ask each one of you to give me, and I know I didn't ask this ahead of time, so I'm going to catch you off guard. So I'm going to ask you for just a one sentence as we look at our topic of how Latin America is embracing open banking. I want one sentence in Spanish and one in English to express how it is, that give some word of encouragement to everyone out there going forward. Go ahead, Mariana, give it a first try.
Well, I would say not one sentence. I would say 3 words that, in my view, are the recommendations, which is regulation, standardization, and collaboration. So in Spanish las recomendaciones serían regulación, estandarización y colaboración para tener éxito.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Well said. Bruno?
Well, Carlos, that got me off guard, but the one of the words that I was thinking about was collaboration. I think it's a very complex environment. I think there are so many different moving parts, so many different players on it. So it's not an easy task if you cannot collaborate. Despite there is a regulatory framework that's the basic thing. But I think that collaboration is the one that drives and bring all the pieces together. So colaboración es la palabra.
And now in Portuguese.
Colaboração é a palavra.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Jonathan?
Yes, I think future of financial services is being built today. We have to shift the paradigm that open banking is a legal and regulatory project. Open banking is an strategic line to work in business of transforming the new financial services. No? Open banking needs open minds. Now in Spanish, el futuro de los servicios financieros se está construyendo hoy, ¿no? Tenemos que cambiar la perspectiva de que es un proyecto regulatorio, mandatorio, para transformarlo en un proyecto de negocio, algo que va a transformar y cambiar cómo hacemos los servicios financieros hoy en día. La banca abierta va a requerir de mentes abiertas que tiren los paradigmas del antiguo sistema tradicional.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And on my behalf, I'm just going to wrap up by saying that, again, everything that we do, we have to be mindful that we're doing it for the consumer, that the consumer of today and the consumer of tomorrow, it has different needs and different aspects of their lives and how they do their lives on a daily basis. So we need to ensure that what we do and what we do, we help the sectors, the various sectors to adapt and to adopt to that consumer of the future. Whether that requires any elements of banks or banking, that's a different question and a different topic. But I think it's for us to move the needle forward. So, volviendo al tema en español, básicamente tenemos que pensar que el tema se trata todo del consumidor, que tenemos que tener la mentalidad y el entendimiento, y nosotros como estamos tan involucrados en este tema, de ayudar a los sectores para empujar el tema a que siempre tenga un enfoque al consumidor del de hoy y el consumidor del futuro. Sea con la banca o no sea, eso es otra cuestión, pero tenemos que mantener ese concepto. So anyway, just to wrap up, I wanted to give a big thank you to all of my panelists. It's been a huge honor to have you all here. I hope that everyone listening has been able to take advantage of this. And again, just a great group of people to have, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you, everyone.